And welcome back to an episode of the Clue Your Jets podcast. We host Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Michael, day one of free agency in the books, and I think if you're a Jets fan, you have to be pretty happy with how things turned out.
For sure, this was a great way to get free agency started. Jets were able to check a lot of boxes and do it in a way where they were getting good value. Obviously, all those boxes so far are on the offensive side of the ball, and you would assume some more defensive moves are coming, but getting it started with Tomlinson was fantastic. Then you get Berrios, Uzama, re-sign Coleman. Really nice start to free agency. I think you have to be, as long as your expectations were within a reasonable realm and you weren't hoping for a Jacksonville Jaguars type of wild spending spree.
I mean, that
as long as you weren't expecting that, this was an awesome start for the Jets.
What was the tweet I saw? I should pull it up. But it was something. It was like that they've spent like $150 million in the receiving core, and it's like Marvin Jones, Christian Kirk. It's just a bunch of, I mean, no pun intended, but it's a bunch of Jags. Like that. I mean, and the funny thing is that's how I think not a lot of fans, but there's a segment of the fan base every year that like wants the Jets to spend like that, and it never works. It literally never works. And I think what you said is accurate. Like going into this week, you and I had pretty measured expectations. That doesn't mean we didn't think the Jets were going to do anything. We said they're going to be active, but they're not going to sign the JC Jacksons or the Allen Robinsons, or they're going to go after those really good value free agents and bring in some good veterans. And I think day one, you saw that. Let's start with Tomlinson and we'll work our way down, and then we'll talk about some of the guys that they could sign tomorrow. This is going to come out. We're recording this Monday night at 9 p.m. So who knows, maybe another signing will break while we're recording this or afterwards or by the time you're listening to this, but we will talk about some of the other guys we want them to bring in. So stay tuned for that. But when we look at Tomlinson, first of all, I'm glad that Douglas this year got a signing out of the way kind of early. I think that should be the strategy every year, because you just give the fan base one legitimate signing in the first like hour or two of free agency, and you just placate them for the whole day. Because the first hour of free agency, I started to see people they didn't get to the fire Douglas level yet, but they started to turn on him. You gave him that little Tomlinson tweet and people were praising JD all day. What did you think about the signing of Tomlinson? Obviously, he was in he was in the tier of guards of guys you wanted to sign at that position, that top tier. So what do you think he brings now that he's officially a Jet?
First of all, I agree with you. I think that's a good strategy for Douglas. This is a fan base that had a guy camping out in a bush outside the facility. So I would want to keep those guys at a distance, and, making a quick signing can, like you said, placate this fan base a little bit, kind of keep them off your back. So that is something, or maybe it's just selfishly, I want to be entertained. I think it's mostly that, but it was good to get on the board quickly. Cause I remember last year, it wasn't until pretty late in the day, I think, when they got Jared Davis and then got Corey Davis, but it took a while. So it was good to get on the board quickly. But with Tomlinson, getting a guard was probably not both the thing that I thought was most likely that they do and the thing that I felt like I wanted them to do the most, because it was one of the strongest positions of any class in this free agency group. And it was a hole that filling makes a lot of sense, to just create more flexibility going into the draft, where you don't have to force an offensive line pick with that number four spot. And like I said, it was a really good class. There were a lot of good options. For me, the first tier was Laken Tomlinson and James Daniels. Those are the two guys who Brandon Scherff is in their talent tier, maybe even better than them. But he's so consistently injury prone that it wasn't something that I was interested in. And looking at the number that he turned out getting, I believe 49.5 over 3 years, makes him the richest guard in the league. So that's definitely something I would not have been down for.
In fact, that was the first thing I think I asked you. Give me three signings that you would hate, and one of them was Brandon Scherff. The second one was Berrios, but at a different price. We'll get to him in a second.
Right. But yeah, I think Tomlinson and Daniels were that top tier, because both these guys are great scheme fits. Much different ages. Daniels is early in his prime. Tomlinson's obviously going to be entering his age 30 season this year. But what's good about Tomlinson is, regarding his age, is that he's actually played his best football the last couple of years. He's been trending up, so it's not really a concern. his age yet, and he's durable, extremely durable. He's never missed a game due to injury. So he brings a lot to the table. Durability is fantastic. Knock on wood. I didn't actually knock on wood, so hopefully you did it.
I just did.
People listening.
Yep.
But yeah, great scheme fit. Not only did he play in this exact offense, but his zone blocking grades are great. And I've watched a little bit of him so far, and you could see it. He's great at. He's actually not the most awesome athlete if you look at his combine numbers, but he's just great at taking angles, holding his ground, and sealing off the backside of runs. At least that's what I've seen so far from watching him. So great run blocker. The pass protection is not amazing, but it's definitely above average. And you complement that with great run blocking, especially run blocking that fits this particular scheme and experience in that scheme. And you get a very solid overall player. So it's great for them to have filled out the offensive line. And I think that, you can still make more moves if you want, whether that's center, whether that's drafting a tackle, whatever you want to do. But as it stands right now with this 5-man unit you've got, like I posted about this earlier, but I don't think it's crazy at all to say there's top 5 potential for this unit. If everyone stays healthy, if AVT and Becton improve, it can be that. The assets have been invested into this unit to where it can be very good and give Zach Wilson the best chance to succeed, give this run game and Michael Carter the best chance to succeed. Douglas has done it. All 5 positions now have a premium asset invested into it. 3 veteran free agents on, fairly top tier deals, and 2 first-round picks, top half of the first round picks. So this offensive line is, I think it's complete, and it's ready to make a play to enter the upper echelon of the league.
Yeah, I think you're a little higher on McGovern than I am, but I think as you saw down the stretch when LDT filled in next to McGovern, he got a lot better when the guard play improved. And also, and Michael and I, we were watching some McGovern before recording this podcast because we were talking about him. You could see why the Jets like him, because he is a perfect scheme fit, and the fact that how many more centers are more athletic? How many centers are more athletic than Connor McGovern? When you watch him get to the second level, he does it differently than most centers around the league. Now, obviously, there's some of the mental mistakes, and he does whiff on some blocks. But like you said, I think the potential for this line is certainly there. Like, Becton has to stay healthy. Fan has to prove it wasn't a fluke. McGovern has to play at a consistent level. But you have to love the guard play for sure, assuming everybody stays healthy, like you said. That durability is absolutely massive. The way I look at it is the Jets got an extremely high character, durable, a Pro Bowler at a position of need. And a position you're trying to invest, a position group you're trying to invest in. I mean, I think this is a home run signing. I try not to overreact to every signing, but I think the thing that I really liked is the Jets correctly looked at themselves and said, look, when we're trying to install the outside zone running system, obviously you're prioritizing athletic guys like McGovern and guys who are finesse blockers, agile. And I think what you saw is the Jets just weren't physical enough up front last year. There were too many times where they were just getting punched in the mouth. I mean, just losing the battle in the trenches. And they had a few games where they were able to keep Zach Wilson upright, but it never really felt like the Jets were imposing their will. It got that way to maybe a little bit towards the end of the season, like against Jacksonville and Tampa Bay. But for most of the season, the Jets were getting bullied up front, even though they had some talent. And I love bringing in a guy like Tomlinson because he is a mauler up front. And like you said, he is a scheme fit. The only concern I would have with him is, can he play right guard? That's clearly what he's going to play. I know he played it in college. Mm-hmm. I was watching him mic'd up at the Pro Bowl, and he, he made a joke about, because they lined him up at right guard. He's like, oh, back to the college days. So he seemed like comfortable with it from that brief little clip. And clearly, if the Jets are giving him that type of money, they think he's comfortable with it. That would be the only thing I would point out. But outside of that, I mean, I think you really have to love this signing. And like you said, what Douglas has done. Do you think that there's any more moves on the offensive line to come? I know you said you think this is it. They've assembled it. But between the free agency and the draft, do you think this is ultimately the starting 5? Or do you think that maybe they go after a center like Bozeman? Do they, maybe pursue the Lael Collins route at tackle? Do they draft somebody like Linderbaum or one of the top tackles? Or do you think this starting 5 is probably what they'll roll into the season with?
I think, like you said, with McGovern, there do seem to be some signals that they might be exploring an upgrade. There's the Ryan Jensen interest. They're apparently very much in on him until Tom Brady did what he did. Bradley Bozeman interest was reported.
I like you.
So
I like you. Couldn't even say that Tom Brady was returning. You just had
I
to
can't even
allude it.
say it. He just,
I don't.
we're not
I
going to
don't.
talk about it.
I don't. I don't. I mean, I don't know. He's now that he's on the Bucks. Like Patriots, Tom
I agree
Brady.
with you. Actually, I agree with you. Like I don't overreact to it as much. He's not. I know the Jets just played him, but they're not going to play him again for a while. I wouldn't rule out that he will still be around in 4 years when they play him again.
But like, well, that's true. But like Patriots, Tom Brady, I hated with like a passion, and now that he's on
Right.
Tampa Bay, it's like I'm kind of enjoying just watching
Yeah,
him. Like
yeah.
the pain is over at this point.
And I also think it's good. I think he's good for the league. He's a good villain. He's fun to root against.
Yes.
And I think that is a positive
Hey,
thing
you need a good
for
heel.
a fan, Yeah, he's a perfect heel. But anyway, I think with McGovern, like there are some I would be okay staying this line. And I thought coming into the offseason they were okay with McGovern, but there are some signs that they potentially are interested in exploring an upgrade. So I would not rule it out. Whether that's Bozeman or Linderbaum.
Yeah,
Specifically those two guys.
Bozeman's the only free agent out there that I think they would explore. But like you said, it doesn't necessarily seem like he has the athletic profile. It's one thing to go and bring in a Mauler at guard, but I think for this system, you really do need somebody with that athleticism at center. Linderbaum would certainly fit that profile, but at 10, do they feel like they should go somewhere else and stick with McGovern and ride him out for the last year of his contract? I don't know, but I think with this Tomlinson signing, Michael, you have to be really excited. And I thought I had an inkling that maybe he was going to go to Miami and team back up with McDaniel, the no state income tax. Miami had more money, sunny weather. But clearly that John Benton, Mike LaFleur, Robert Saleh connection held strong. And I think that's the other thing that I'm really happy about is the Jets have made it very clear that their mission statement is to bring in high character individuals who absolutely love football. And across all their signings today, I mean, especially the two outsiders that they brought in, that couldn't be any more clear. If you go listen to Laken Tomlinson mic'd up or CJ Uzomah mic'd up, you'll see what I'm talking about. That this guy is a guy who can, rally, that the locker room can rally around. And you could see it by all the 49ers players that were upset. Trent Williams, that he left and players and more so the fan base. If a fan base is really sad that a player is left, that's kind of a good, I don't know. It's a good litmus test to see how good that player is. If I check the replies to the Adam Schefter tweet and then like the fan base is like, rip Bozo or like, thank God, it's like, okay, the Jets got a bad player. But if they're all upset, I think that's a relatively good sign. So excited with Tomlinson. Then with Berrios, you and I were literally texting like 15 minutes before then because there's that report that said like, oh, Berrios might get $8 or $9 million a year. And you and I were going back and forth. You've been very against paying Berrios anything more than $6 million. I think you said $6 million. I like him. He's a good player, but he's not an amazing player. I wouldn't pay that. I wouldn't go up to $8 or $9 million, which I generally agreed with. I think I said I would go up to 7 for him. But surprisingly, especially when you look at some of the contracts that receivers got, a very team-friendly deal. You bring back that homegrown talent. I mean, that is something that the Jets have really struggled with over the last decade or so. But between John Franklin Myers and Braxton Berrios, ironically enough, brought in the same waiver wire period in 2019. Both two guys, proved their worth in the locker room and on the field, and they got rewarded with contract extensions. I was really excited that the Jets were able to get Berrios back at this number.
Absolutely. When I saw the news, I was ecstatic, even as someone who has been not quite as big of a Braxton Berrios fan as a lot of people. But like you said, we were talking about this right as soon as the news broke. And I literally said that, $6 million per year, sign me up. I'll definitely be in for that. And that's what he ended up getting. So I think it's a very fair value for what he brings to the table. You get back his return ability, you get back, his good ability to contribute in all the trick play stuff, the jet motion, lining up in the backfield, end arounds, all that, and also be a reliable backup slot receiver, maybe even third receiver. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I think this was a good price for everything he brings to the table. I think some of the higher numbers that are being thrown out there, he doesn't necessarily bring as much as, for me personally, what I would like for a receiver to bring to the table if you're paying 8, 9, 10 million, whatever. So I think this is a good price for what you're ideally getting from him. But I think it's interesting now to see what they do next at wide receiver, because, with this contract now, it is kind of hard to fit another wide receiver in there in free agency, especially if they make a big defensive signing like Marcus Williams, Gilmore, whoever, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But it is going to be probably, and like you said, the contracts other receivers are getting, Christian Kirk is getting $18 million per year. What's Russell Gage going to get? Probably not that much, but maybe in between Berrios and Kirk, 12, something like that. So it is going to be hard to fit in another reliable guy. But I still think they can use some more depth, another floor raiser before they get into the draft, and hopefully raise the ceiling with another draft pick. So it will be interesting to see if they stand pat with what they have and then rely on the draft to round it out, or if they do find another way to get some more depth and raise the floor a little bit in there. You mentioned Keelan Cole. I think at this point that might be the most sensible way to kind of complete the wide receiver unit.
Yeah, it's like I don't love Keelan Cole, but I will say I was happy when they signed him out of Jacksonville. I thought he was, it was reported that Douglas loved him. He's a great blocker, knows the system. He's going to come relatively cheap, probably cheaper than he came last year. He has chemistry with Zach. And yeah, you're signing a guy just to be your wide receiver 5, because you're going to draft somebody. You already have Berrios. So this is just a guy to be depth, when the injuries inevitably happen. Can he play snaps and can you be comfortable with him? And yeah, at the money, I think Keelan Cole probably makes the most sense. I mean, they could go and sign a guy like DJ Shark or Russell Gage, like you said, but I don't see it. And the thing is like everybody's freaking out about the wide receiver position a few days ago when they didn't trade for Amari Cooper, and then it was like Calvin Ridley got suspended for the year, and so all these different things happened, and I think people were worried that the Jets weren't going to be able to sign or to surround Zach Wilson with a ton of talent at the position. But I will say, like at the beginning of the offseason, this is kind of how I saw things playing. I mean, once the contract news about Berrios started to get a little higher, I got maybe more skeptical about how this could work. But bring back Berrios for something around $6 million. He can be your slot receiver. He can be your receiver 4, your gadget guy. He obviously brings you kick return value. You have him. Obviously, you're hoping Elijah Moore is going to take the next step into establishing himself as a potential wide receiver 1. You're hoping that Corey Davis is going to improve on last season, although he did do some good things last year. I think he's getting underrated by some folks in the fan base. He is not a horrible receiver. And then you have the option to go draft somebody at 10 or 35 or 38 or, hell, even 4, and bring in that last piece, that game-changing piece, whether that's Drake London or Garrett Wilson or Treylon Burks, whoever it is. And then it's like that receiver core is pretty good, especially, and we're going to get to him in just a second, if you keep bolstering that tight end spot in an offense that tries to run a lot of 12 personnel. So you're not even going to have that many receivers on the field at once. I think bringing back Berrios is huge for the entire receiver room because it opens up, it takes pressure off of having to feel like you need to go and sign one of these receivers to overpay for one of these receivers in free agency. They got their own guy, the guy they wanted on a team-friendly deal. And now you turn your attention to the draft. And, if you hit on that guy, you can get an elite playmaker at that position on a rookie contract. It's just like the quarterback. So I'm really excited how things turned out. I think Berrios was a huge signing, and I'm glad that the reports about him getting $8, $9, $10 million were incorrect. And I'm also glad that we kept him away from New England or Miami. That was a bit of a fear of mine. CJ Uzomah was the last big signing of the Jets today, depending when you're listening to this. But I really we weren't talking about him too much. We mentioned him a few times. I kind of assumed that he would go back to Cincinnati. But man, I'm really excited about the signing the more I've looked into it. I think the yards after catch potential is really what I like. And the fact that they're signing a guy on the upswing. I'll be honest, I didn't watch too much Uzomah until the playoffs. I really only watched him during the playoffs instead of whatever I saw on Red Zone or when the Jets weren't on. And I have to say, it was like when Jamar Chase was double covered, that's where Joe Burrow was going. I mean, he was clearly Joe Burrow's security blanket. He was a high character locker room guy. I mean, that's not just saying that. He clearly, he did a lot of the pregame speeches. A lot of guys in the locker room miss him. The whole fan base is devastated that he's gone. Uzomah to me seems like a really a really solid signing and a guy who I think may even earn. He, they got him on a good contract, but I think he may even outplay that in this offense, in that George Kittle type of role, because I think this offense really does capitalize a lot of the things that he does well in terms of yards after catch. I know you're not as bullish maybe as I am on Uzama, but I know you still think it's a good signing. What did you think when they first signed him, and now that you had some more time to look into it, what is your reaction?
Well, I'll be honest. At first, I wasn't too thrilled with the signing, and I was all this was going on, me discussing it with you. So I sort of went through this process of embracing him a little bit because
every year
I didn't. Yeah, this is pretty much every single thing. This is the standard.
I think we did this for Adam Gase too.
This is literally the Adam Gase. It's an Adam Gase syndrome. You got to find a way to rationalize everything, but there is no rationalization required here. I think for me, it was more so just I didn't consider him as an option as much as other guys coming in, because I feel like for me, my mind was on, first Dalton Schultz, get that top tier guy. But if not him, I was more focused on the lower tier, like Max Williams, Gerald Everett, guys who they still might potentially sign. But Uzama seemed to be in that middle tier where it's like, he's a bigger name. He was on the Super Bowl representative, scored a few touchdowns, well-known, and seemed like he was going to get, I thought, maybe 10, 11, 12 per year, especially with some of the other contracts that were thrown around. With Njoku getting tagged, definitely seemed like that was possible. So I expected him to get significantly more than $8 million per year. I didn't think it was the price range the Jets were going to operate in, so I didn't do a ton of research on him. And then, you just look at the raw numbers, $8 million per year he had less than 500 yards last year. It's not amazing on paper, but then when you really dig into it, you could see the reasons for why they made this move. And you mentioned the yards after catch. I think that's easily the most appealing asset. This is a guy, and we were watching some more of him before we started recording, but he's got really good speed for his size. He's
not even just for his size.
Yeah, like we saw him run away from Miles Jack, from defensive backs. Like after years of watching lumbering Ryan Griffin and Daniel Brown, Tyler Kroft, all these other Jags, it's going to be jarring to watch CJ Uzama carry the ball around, because he was a great yak guy last year, and I think that fits great in their scheme. He was one of the top yak tight ends, one of the top tight ends in forcing missed tackles after the catch. And there's a great stat from Next Gen Stats that they put out that he was the number one tight end in the league in terms of the difference of his team's yards per play when he was on the field versus when he was off. So he was an important player for them, a reliable security blanket, not a guy who did a ton down the field. There's that one great play he made against Marlon Humphrey, but that was the only deep catch he made all season. So most of what he did was just checking the ball down. But I think what's exciting is that in that offense, that's all they needed from him. When you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and all these weapons, that's all they needed him to do is run curls, run flats, and be there for Joe Burrow. But, you see the way he carries the ball, the way he can move. It's exciting to think about what he might be able to do in an offense that tries to unleash him a little bit more and use him as more than just a check down. But even if he is just a check down, he is nice in that role, because a security blanket is great. And just a guy who is, a big frame, can catch the ball and doesn't drop so many balls like Ryan Griffin and even Kroft at points last year is valuable for a young quarterback. So beyond the raw numbers that he put up last year aren't amazing for $8 million per year, but you dig deeper, you look at the yak and think about how that fits in this offense. And his blocking is, I'm interested to watch more of his blocking, see how good it is, but it seems like by most accounts it is fairly solid. His pass blocking numbers were good last year. So he's a complete solid tight end. I think I don't see a possibility, besides him getting hurt, I don't see a way where he really disappoints. He might not be, put up enormous numbers,
right?
That, sort of warrant $8 million per year that you would typically hope to get from that, but he's going to play his role. He's going to be solid. He's going to be reliable. He brings the locker room presence, like you mentioned. and sometimes we just say that about players, but with both him and Tomlinson, you see the way that former teammates reacted. You see their mic'd up videos and the way they lead huddles and seem like positive influences and motivators for their teammates. It's very legitimate with these two guys, the impact that they have off the field. So that's I think the synopsis with CJ Uzama. I think he's a guy who doesn't have many big weaknesses that are going to disappoint you. And at the same time, he has potential to be even more than he was last year. So at the worst, I think you're getting a good, reliable safety blanket, good locker room guy, decent blocker. At the best, maybe a good blocker, maybe a very good dynamic tight end. We'll see how much they unleash him. But this is a sign they need to make, a good, reliable tight end for an offense that wants to run quite a bit of 12 personnel.
Yeah, and I definitely think they're going to end up drafting a tight end. I think that's a no-brainer. But it does free you up to not having to take a tight end at 35 or 38. You could wait to the third round. If you didn't get a guy at Uzama's level, if you only got a Max Williams or Hayden Hurst, two guys that I like, I think you would have felt more pressure to have to take a tight end. They still have to take one, but they could wait to the third round and pair him up with a Ruckert or a Weidemeyer instead of Trey McBride. They also could take Trey McBride at 35 if he's there. I do have kind of an inkling that he could go at the end of the first round for some reason. But if he's there at 35 and you have a high grade on him and you want to run that 12 personnel offense with McBride and Uzama, I mean, that's awesome. That's awesome stuff. I think Uzama is you mentioned the yak stuff, but I like his potential in the intermediate range as well. Those PA boots. And like you said, it's like over the last decade, we watched Uzama. He had one play against the Jaguars this year where it was like a very simple, throw to the flat, and then he made a man miss and he ran up and you saw a speedy 20-yard touchdown or whatever. And I was like, out of all the plays that Jets tight ends have made over the last decade, that would probably rank like second, like maybe behind Chris Herndon's like one-handed catch against Green Bay. Just that level. It's a good play for a tight end, but it's a play you see every Sunday. The level of production the Jets have gotten out of the position since Dustin Keller is laughable. I mean, Austin Seferian-Jenkins had that one good year. Herndon had a promising rookie season, but outside of that, I mean, it's just like the amount of bums that the Jets have put on the field at this position is astonishing. And so the fact that we finally took a step in the right direction, I think last year, Douglas and Saleh, it's rumored that they were in on Jonnu Smith, that they wanted to bring him in. They didn't end up making any upgrades at tight end. And I think that was probably the biggest mistake the entire offseason last year, was not addressing this position because you knew how much Michael LaFleur was going to want to use it. So I'm really excited with the Uzama signing. Outside of that, the Jets did bring in or brought back Tevin Coleman. I think that was their only other move. They brought back Berrios and then bringing back Tevin Coleman. I like this move as well. I think they could still sign another running back. Coleman didn't have a lot of guaranteed money. I think it's probably more likely they'll draft somebody and then pair him with Carter and Coleman. You still have Ty Johnson if you want to keep him around. But Coleman was a guy that I really thought performed last year. I mean, he's not an elite running back by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a guy who can take some reps away from Carter. And you saw the burst numerous times last season, and he has experience in the system, good pass catcher. I mean, that was a pretty no-brainer move and not surprising in my eyes. But briefly, I mean, what were your thoughts on bringing back Tevin Coleman?
I think it's a move that makes sense. He really seemed like a good change of pace sort of back for them last year. Michael Carter's a little bit more patient, tries to string the play out a little bit. And I'm just talking about style. That's not a criticism. But,
yeah.
Tevin Coleman comes in and he's straight downhill, hitting full speed right away. And it's just a nice way to change it up. And I really feel like they could have done more with him last season. What I was most appealed about when they signed him was his receiving ability. He was a very solid receiver with the Niners and Falcons, good on screens, good in the slot. But they didn't really explore that a ton. And they gave a lot of those reps to Ty Johnson, which had its moments, but he also dropped a lot of balls and gave up a lot of pressure as a pass blocker. So I would like to see some more of that from Coleman. But it's a worthwhile signing. And I'm pretty sure it's a deal that's very light on the guarantees. So, they're not even committed to bring him in for the season. They don't want to, but I definitely like it. He's a change of pace, good long speed. I think he has passing game ability. They should explore more than they did last season. Um, yeah, not much to complain about with this one.
Before we get to the guys we think they could or should sign today, or for the rest of free agency, as far as returning Jets, because we mentioned Berrios and Coleman, are there any other guys that you think that they'll bring back that they haven't already?
I think Flacco would seem like is trending that way. Do you think
Croft?
LDT? I don't think so. I
You don't
feel
think
like
they
they're
bring back
gonna.
Croft?
I mean, they still have. I hope they cut Griffin, but they still have Wesco, who I feel like is better at tight end.
Well, they brought back
Um,
Bodden, so it kind of feels like, I
right.
mean, it's not, they could have him compete directly at fullback, but maybe they do try to send Wesco back to tight end, to try to have him be more of your blocking tight end this year.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, do you think LDT comes back?
The thing is that I kind of do. I think there's definitely a chance, but because of Tomlinson's durability, I think he may try to look somewhere else to see if he can get to a place where he has a chance to start. And there are a lot of teams in this league that run that wide zone, that outside zone system that the Jets are running. So it's not like he couldn't find a team that would fit his strengths. He could go right down to Miami and start down there. So no, I'll say no. I think the Jets will probably make him an offer because he's great depth, but I think it's probably more likely that they'll bring back like Dan Feeney and they'll draft somebody. I hope they can bring back the doctor, but I feel like he'll sign somewhere where he has probably a better chance to start. All right,
Yeah,
Michael.
before you get to that, I also
Yeah.
think the same for Moses. I think both these
Yeah.
guys are going to have better opportunities.
Yeah.
Obviously the Jets would like to have them as depth, but they're going to find better opportunities, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think Moses and LDT they'll make offers too, and maybe it's one of those things where those guys don't sign for a while. There's always the first 2 days are always hectic. The third day it starts to slow down a little bit. As we get through the week, you'll see less and less signings, and then it's like then you'll see a signing like 2 weeks from now or whatever. And I think that's kind of when Morgan Moses and maybe LDT will start signing. And in that period, if they don't really get the type of contract they're looking for, or whatever, then or maybe they wait till after the draft or whatever. I could see the Jets bringing them back. Let's get into some of the guys we still want them to target. I guess we'll just start with there's one thing I think we should mention. I think great day one. There really wasn't anybody that they didn't get that I wanted outside of one guy, and that was DJ Jones, defensive tackle. And then tied with that was the Jets let Foley Fatukasi walk to Jacksonville. So your thoughts on Foley Fatukasi not coming back and then not being able to secure DJ Jones who went to Denver?
Yeah, I think like with Foley, it's a deal, and both of these guys got, I believe, the same deal,
Yeah.
3 for 30. So it's a deal that makes sense when you look at the market for these types of players. I hesitate to call them nose tackles because they don't actually always line up.
Yeah, they're more like defensive
tackle.
ends.
Yeah, but playing that role, run game, run down, stopping the run. Like that's a market for these type of players. There are guys who are not a lot worse, but not as good as those two players who have been getting 8-9 million per year. So that's a market. It's a reasonable value, but I think there are some teams that are in position to pay for that type of player and some teams that aren't. And I don't think Foley's a great scheme fit, first of all, but I just don't know if the Jets are in position to pay that type of player. They do need run defense, but you already have Lawson signed, JFM, Quinnen potentially coming, potentially a first round rookie contract coming in with the fourth pick, which isn't necessarily cheap. Rankins is still signed right now, so they have a lot of money invested into the D line. This is a team that still has a long way to go, and it's rebuild. And I'm not sure if 10 million per year for a run stuffing tackle who plays half the snaps is the best idea. And I'm not arguing that. It's more I'm debating it because DJ Jones is really good, and he would have been an amazing scheme fit and gone a long way towards repairing their run defense. So I would have definitely been a huge fan if they did it. They didn't do it, and I understand why they didn't. It definitely makes sense. Either way, it's a tough one because it's a great scheme fit. It's a big need for them to fix their run defense, to replace Foley. But it's also, I can understand why they wouldn't spend that much money. But now they're going to have to find a way to replace Foley's role in a more affordable way, whether that's with another free agent or a draft pick.
Yeah, I mean, they could have cut Rankins and signed one of them. Also it is an extremely deep defensive line class. So I think if they don't make another move in free agent, I think they will sign somebody. But if it's not like a high level or even a guy you'd be comfortable starting, wouldn't be surprising for me to see them take two defensive tackles because it's such a good class. They also do have Jonathan Marshall, who I think they are pretty high on. But the other thing is, even if they didn't get him, that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't really try to get him. I mean, they may have offered him the same contract that Denver offered him, 3 for $30, and then he just chose Denver because I don't see the Jets going higher than that. I don't see the Jets giving DJ Jones $11 million per year. $10 million would be a bit of a stretch. Like you said, they probably didn't go that high, but even if they did, it's conceivable that he would have gone to Denver. So that when you look at that, there isn't really anything you'd want Joe Douglas to do differently. It's just kind of unfortunate that the market for Jones got that high, but it makes sense because he's such a good run stuffer. So I'm trying to think about how much cap room the Jets have left. Obviously, they'll probably try to push some of the money from guys like Carl Lawson and Corey Davis and CJ Mosley, try to use that on this year's cap and free up the money for future caps. So they might not have it as much as we think, but I don't know if you have a number on that, Michael. But as far as what they've spent so far, I think you had a tweet about it on the amount of money they've spent so far. I'm going to keep talking so you can.
I mean, they had about 35 million in effective cap space. If you account for the 13 million that they need to pay the rookie class.
Right.
And then, we don't know the actual cap numbers, but if you assume Barrios is 6, Tomlinson 13, Uzama 8, then throw in 1 for Coleman, that's 28. So I guess that leaves them with about 10 million left if you just go off of those numbers. But the cap hits are usually backloaded. So, and then they're going to restructure deals, and also the cap is fake.
And they can cut guys.
So they probably have a lot more than that, but I would say 10 million.
How many more big signings do you think they have in them? And by big, I mean starter signings, guys to sign who will start week 1.
I don't know. It really seems like there's a lot of smoke to the fire of Stephon Gilmore and Marcus Williams. Not both, but getting one of those. There was pretty big news just before we recorded this. As it relates to this topic, with the Niners signing Charvarius Ward to a pretty big deal, the Chiefs cornerback, because Connor Hughes mentioned earlier that it was the Jets, Niners, and Raiders in the running for Gilmore, specifically with the Jets and Niners out in front. So with the Niners investing in another corner, and trying to pull, Ward got 3 years, $40.5 million. So that's their big signing at corner. So that kind of pulls them out of the Gilmore sweepstakes. So do the Jets sign Stephon Gilmore? I was hoping it would happen. I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but if it were to happen, I thought it would be cool. I thought it would be cool.
You didn't want to say you wanted him?
I thought it would be cool if it happened during this podcast so I can react to it. But in terms of would I be a fan of it? It's a really tough one because like one year, there's a lot of upside there. That's exciting. He was still pretty good last year. I know he's 32, going to be 32, but he's still very good last year and the year before that when he was healthy. And for 1 year, not a long-term risk, some experience for the young guys to be around, potentially a very good player. That could work. And we've seen those type of deals be successful around the league, whether it's Xavier Rhodes, Casey Hayward, even Richard Sherman. That was a larger deal, but we've seen veteran corners have these, into their 30s, like one good year in a good situation, not necessarily maintain it, but they've been capable of having one good year. So 1 year for Gilmore, even if it's a high number, that is kind of intriguing to me, but definitely anything multi-year I would not be a fan of for a 32-year-old corner who has missed a lot of games over the past couple of years, 14 games, I think the last 2 years. So it's intriguing for sure. But anyway, it does seem like with Marcus Williams, there was apparently mutual interest. I do feel like there's a good chance they make one of those two deals.
I think.
Do you agree? Because I really think that there's a lot of like I said, smoke to the fire, like legitimate signs.
Yes. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I think by the time most people are listening to this, I think those fires will have been settled. I think Gilmore and or Williams will have signed somewhere. So maybe this is all a moot point. Guess you can skip through this. But yeah, Rich Cimini's pointing out that there's mutual interest between the Jets and Marcus Williams, and Connor Hughes is saying that he's their top priority. And then the Jets are, deep into the, right in the thick of things with Stephon Gilmore. And it seems like it's between them and the Raiders. I think, I put my tweet out, today where I said I would rather have Stephon Gilmore and Terrell Edmunds at safety than just splurging on Marcus Williams. But they're all great players. I think the thing with safety, and we were talking about this, where it's like, a bad safety can really hurt you, but there's only so much a great safety can do. And there are some game-changing, playmaking safeties out there like Troy Polamalu and Ed Reed, where it's like you feel their presence. I don't necessarily know if Marcus Williams is that. He's certainly an elite middle fielder. I don't think you could really find a better one in the league. You can find guys who maybe perform as well, but in terms of that middle third, you're not going to find a guy like that. So you're not going to find many guys like that, I should say. It's possible that Saleh, is in love with Marcus Williams and that Joe Douglas will go up to the 16 or 17 or hell, even 18 million. I don't see 18 million, but like 16, 15, 17 million for Marcus Williams. I don't see it happening. I also don't think that the Jets want safeties who are versatile and who can do both things. I'm not saying Marcus Williams isn't versatile, but he clearly has an elite skill, and that's being a center fielder. And it's not necessarily being able to be a versatile safety. The other thing is, look, Lamarcus Joyner shouldn't preclude the Jets from doing anything, but this is clearly a staff that likes Joyner and had big plans for him last year. They brought him back. He is a free safety. And outside of Marcus Williams, like you pointed out, Michael, the free safety market isn't as good, but there's a lot of great strong safeties like Edmunds, who I want to talk about in a second. So, you have Joyner. You could sign one of those stud, young, strong safeties who can be here for a few years. You sign him, and then you could go draft a free safety, on day 2. And he can compete with Joyner and hell, throw in Ashton Davis and Jason Pinnock in there as well. And it's like, I like that path. And on top of that, then you could also sign Gilmore if you wanted to. I like it for the same money as just getting Marcus Williams. So I prefer that path than just signing Marcus Williams, but I'm not going to act like if the Jets sign Marcus Williams, I won't be on the same podcast tomorrow night, singing Joe Douglas's praises. Right. He's a hell of a player. You have to be happy if they land him. My ideal path, though, would be to go after Terrell Edmunds and, ideally pair him on a 1-year deal with Gilmore. I hadn't really watched too much of Edmunds. Honestly, I'll be completely frank. I wasn't even aware that he's a free agent. I mean, I saw you put that article out about him a few weeks ago, and I just missed it. And today when I was asking you, was like, so who are the other safeties that they could go after? You pointed out Edmunds. For what it's worth, I mean, I feel like Saleh's brought up his brother Tremaine Edmunds like 3 or 4 times in press conferences that I've watched, just talking about how much of a freak he is. But that's not the main reason. The thing is Edmunds is a perfect scheme fit. He's great in coverage. He has elite athleticism. He's 25. If Marcus Williams is getting 16 million, I think Edmunds is probably more in the 8-9 range. So you can get it for about half the price. He is that versatile safety. And we were watching some film of his, and man, he does make some high level plays. He's the type of signing that I would really, really love. If the Jets got him, not even if they don't land Gilmore and they just Allen Robinson or the other big name free agents. It's always those guys who fly under the radar. And Terrell Edmunds to me seems like the perfect free agent safety for the Jets in my eyes. Michael, what do you think about Terrell Edmunds and the other free agent safeties out there, including Marcus Williams? We'll talk about Gilmore and the rest of the corners and other positions, but just looking at safety, it's clear that the Jets are at least going to sign one safety. So what are your thoughts on the landscape there?
Yeah, I agree. And with your plan in terms of, going for a strong safety, and even though we said that one of those other big signings seemed likely, if that doesn't happen, if Marcus Williams doesn't happen, I think getting Gilmore and pairing him with one of these strong safeties, and also, even if that doesn't happen, just going for one of these guys anyway, I think makes sense. There's a good group of options here. Jaron Kearse, Jordan Whitehead, And Terrell Edmonds, who's I think our guy now. Yeah, we watched some of him before this podcast, and I had done some research on him earlier. I put out an article on him, but I think he makes a lot of sense. He's a guy who is very good as a strong safety, very good in coverage, and we saw it when we were watching him. He can man up against tight ends. He is very good at sniffing out screens and making tackles behind the line. Amazing athleticism. His relative athletic score, which is it sums up how you perform in every single drill, and compares it, scores it from 0 to 10 relative to other players your position. Yeah, at the combine, 9.86 out of 10. So he's about as good as it gets in terms of an athlete, and it translates. And one thing that was interesting making him a scheme fit is that he covers man to man in the slot about as much as any other safety. And the Jets asked their safeties to do that a lot last season, actually the 10th highest rate of any safety unit in the league. So there is that fit there. He's very good in slot coverage, does it a lot. The Jets ask that of their safeties. So he brings a lot to the table. I think he highlights those strong safety options, but also, like I said, Jordan Whitehead, less of a coverage guy, more of a outstanding downhill run defender. And the J-Ron Curse, a little bit more balance between both phases as a strong safety. But any of those three guys, I think you're getting a good above average starter who should come at like a mid-tier cost, 8, 9, 10 million, somewhere around there, maybe even less, because Xavier Woods, who's a free safety for the Vikings, signed at, I think, about 5 million per year. So that market could be fairly affordable for some of these mid-tier guys. And I want to talk about a little bit what you said earlier with, the value of the safety position, because it's a different position than some others on the football field, to where it's hard for a safety to be dominant. And, there are some guys who can do it. Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, who come to mind instantly. Jamal Adams was that for, a short period with the Jets. It seemed like he was going to be that.
It didn't have too many wins, though.
It didn't add too many wins, but although, to be fair, I think, and we talked about
this, the Giants game,
I think like maybe they don't win a couple of those 2019 games without them. Giants, definitely Cowboys. So it did add some wins, but it's hard for a safety to be really dominant. Where most of their value comes in is not making mistakes. Like, you think of mostly when you notice safeties is when they're messing up, more so when they make good plays. Like, we think of the Panthers game last year where, Joyner gets hurt, backups come in, Sheldrick Redwine gives up the Robbie Anderson touchdown. And that turns out to be the difference in the game. The Bucs game, Elijah Riley gives up the game-winning touchdown. That's the difference in the game. So the value of safety is more so how they don't make those mistakes. And I think that's what makes Marcus Williams really good, is that he gives up touchdowns very infrequently, does not commit a lot of penalties, does not give up a lot of catches. And that's where the value comes in. And he does make a lot of interceptions too. He's averaging about 3 a year. He gets at least 2 every single season. So he does do that too. But that's where the value comes in at safety, is not messing up, playing your role. So it just comes down to how much do you want to pay for a player like that? Because it's definitely valuable, definitely helps you win a lot of games. But how much cap do you want to invest into a player who's never going to be like, that guy is the reason we won a game? Over the course of the season, he'll add a lot of value. When he gives up 1 touchdown and the Jets safeties give up 6, 7 or whatever. But, when you invest a lot of cap in a player, you want it to be a difference making guy. And, Williams he's elite, but he's not, is he 18, 19, 20 million player, like some rumors are saying? I don't think so. But 15, 16, I think I'd be pretty excited about that. So so we'll see how they value him. But it's safety is just a really interesting position to try to, put a value on.
Yeah, that's a good qualifier that we should put out there. If they get Williams for 15, I think it'll be around 15, 16, if I'm being honest. Because it's honestly, a lot of these numbers that get floated around are by the agents. I mean, Braxton Berrios is a great example of that, but we've seen that, year after year. I don't think he gets 8. I don't see anybody paying him 18, 19, or 20 million unless they're really desperate to make a splash. I think 15, 16 is a lot more realistic. And if the Jets give him that, you can't hate it. They brought in a great player. It would be similar to how I felt when the Jets brought in CJ Mosley. It's like, And better than that, because CJ Mosley was like a very clear overpay, whereas like 15, 16 for Williams wouldn't necessarily be a clear overpay. It would just be, maybe not how you'd want to allocate your resources position wise, but you're still bringing in a hell of a player who, like you said, is going to help you win football games, or maybe help you not lose football games, probably more appropriately. Yeah, you can't be mad about that. But after I watched some Terrell Edmonds and thinking that you could get him for about half the price, I've talked myself into it a little bit.
And I will say, though, we're talking about positional value. I think Douglas has shown he has a good understanding and a loyalty to operating with that sort of mentality. So if he feels confident enough to invest in Marcus Williams, then I think we should, trust his judgment and, the team as a whole, the coaching staff, everyone, that they have a good plan for him, that they believe he will provide a good return on investment, because this isn't a staff, for all of their faults, winning 2 of 6 games the last 2 years. For all their faults, they definitely show a nice understanding of positional value. They don't wildly spend on running backs, or safety, another position they haven't wildly spent on. They focused on, I think, what we classify as premium positions, and in terms of positional valuation, done a nice job. So it seems like they have a good understanding of that. So if they do see a safety as worthy of going all in for, then I think we should feel fairly confident that they have a good plan for him.
Outside of Stephon Gilmore, it does kind of sound like the Jets are in that cornerback market. I mean, maybe if they missed out on Gilmore, they won't be. They weren't apparently in the J.C. Jackson or Carlton Davis markets, but who knows? Maybe if they miss out on Gilmore, they'll be sniffing around Darius Williams or DJ Reed or somebody like that. Who are some of the corners that, if they don't go Gilmore, you would be happy with them bringing in?
I think you just mentioned DJ Reed. I think he's a good one. Comes from the Seahawks, so similar schematic background. Young guy. He's going to be 26 this year. Good numbers, couple of picks each of the last 2 years, 17 passes defended in 24 games. I'm looking at the numbers. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I'm also not learning about him right now. I did research him earlier, so I did put in some effort with this. But yeah, he actually had really good coverage numbers this year. And again, the scheme fit is there. He's young. He's a guy I definitely keep an eye on. I'm pretty sure someone mentioned him. I saw one article. I forget who it was or where it was from. It was a real source, though, that was saying that he potentially was an option that the Jets would be looking at. So I would keep him in mind. I was going to mention Charvarius Ward. He's off the board now. He's kind of a solid starter, but that was a pretty big contract.
For that money, no way.
I don't know. Cornerback, I feel like the Gilmore thing seems potentially real. If I could see that, I could see DJ Reed, but beyond that, I don't know if there's anyone who really wows me, and it might be better to just, kind of stick with your young guys, keep that building, and potentially add to it in the draft. It's not a ton of awesome options, I think, outside of Gilmore and Reed right now.
Outside of corner and safety, I mean, day one seemed primarily, it was primarily on the it was on the offense. There was no defensive signings. It was all offensive. There aren't really many other ways it could go offensively unless they want to upgrade center. I mean, obviously they have to probably bring in more depth at receiver. There were some rumblings that maybe they'll sign another tight end. Connor Hughes kind of disputed that. I also agree. I think if anything, they bring back Croft and draft somebody. Maybe they sniff around the running back market, but I think they're probably done on the offensive side of the ball, outside of some re-signings, and then maybe they'll sniff around some of the offensive linemen as either depth or that center position. But defensively, I think they are going to make one big splash in the secondary. I don't know exactly who it'll be, but I think they will make a significant splash. And then in the front seven, Michael, I think they will add somebody else, maybe not qualified as a splash, but maybe a guy who you would be comfortable starting. When they brought in Sheldon Rankins last year, that was somebody we weren't talking about at all. And then it was, a sizable deal, and we were happy with it. I think they'll do something like that. Maybe it'll be a defensive lineman. Maybe it'll be a linebacker. Who knows? Maybe they'll bring in an edge. But are there anybody else that we haven't talked about that you are either hoping the Jets will sign or you think the Jets will sniff around?
I mean, I feel like we mostly covered what my main priorities were. I mean, the wide receivers just where it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, with the way, like, I thought Oluokun would be an interesting option if he was like, 5-6 million low tier starter, something like that. But he went out and got 15 million a year. Devondre Campbell, who I would have liked, 5-year, 50 million, which for him makes sense. It's just that, the Jets already have CJ Mosley and are stuck with him. I don't think it would make a ton of sense to invest in another linebacker. But outside of them, I mean, a linebacker addition is possible. Jayon Brown, Christian Kirksey, Azeez Al-Shaair from the 49ers, who is used to being, sub-package linebacker playing like a third of the snaps in San Francisco. So he could fit that role for them. Quan Alexander.
He makes a ton of sense. Al-Shaair. That's a guy that nobody's talking about. And people were talking about Uzomah, but I will say I texted you like a few hours. I did that more, this morning. I said Uzomah just seems like the type of guy the Jets will sign. Al-Shaair seems like another type of guy where the Jets could sign. The other guy I didn't mention, we talked about him on our last podcast, Landon Collins, who got cut by the Commanders, had a good season and played a lot of linebacker, even though he's that safety background. I think they need to bring in a pass coverage linebacker before the draft. So I think one of those guys, because obviously CJ's probably your Mike linebacker. Quincy, that's a heat-seeking missile, a guy you can send on blitzes. Hopefully can develop into a better run defender. He was flashing a bit more as a pass coverage linebacker, I will say. But I think they need that, a legitimate pass coverage linebacker. Just so you can be, confident with on third down. Because as I was saying to you, Michael, I think you and I actually both value linebacker more than maybe the general public does, especially in this defense. Because, most of the linebackers are involved in pretty much every single play, not only the run game, but I mean, any pass that's, 15 yards or less, which is like 80% of passes in today's NFL. It's all at the linebackers. They're all targeting the linebackers. So if you have great pass coverage linebackers, that gives you a huge advantage. And then if you have highly instinctual linebackers who can sniff out runs and who can read play actions, I mean, that changes your entire defense. And the Jets really suffered from poor linebacker play because this defense in particular, more so than other defenses the Jets have run, simply by just going from the 3-4 to a 4-3, having less linebackers out there. And then the style of defense, solid plays, puts a lot of pressure on him. So I don't love the idea of just walking into next year with CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams, and then what are you going to draft a rookie in the third round? Because maybe they'll draft somebody maybe they'll draft Nakobe Dean or Devin Lloyd or somebody in the second round, but I don't really think they will. I think maybe they'll draft like Chad Muma or something, round 3 or day 3. But I think they need to bring in a free agent linebacker. He doesn't need to be elite. You don't have to go pay him, like you said, Foye $15 million a year, give Devondre Campbell a 5-year contract. But a guy like Al-Shaair makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I agree. But and to your point about linebacker being more important than most realize, that's definitely something I'm a huge proponent of. I mean, you have 2 starting linebackers that play every single snap. For the majority of teams, they have 2 guys who are 100%ers. At least the Jets are definitely operating that way right now. And that's unique compared to the rest of the defense. D linemen don't play every snap. And then the corners and the safeties typically do 2 starters, but those guys are not involved in every single play. Yeah. They're not very involved in the run game. And obviously they are in coverage, but even in coverage, sometimes, if it's a one side of the field concept or rollout or something, specifically the safeties are obviously, far away from the ball. They're not always involved. And I'm not saying these positions aren't important, but just compared to linebacker, like they're very frequently involved in what's going on, and what they're doing has an effect. I feel like what the linebackers do affects the result of the play more often than any other defensive position. So it is really important, even if a lot of what they do isn't flashy and it's just as simple as, getting enough depth to cover a crossing route, or, executing a blitz in a good way. Even if you don't get a sack, just beat the linebacker, beat the running back and create pressure. things like that. So it is, and in the run game, just even if you don't make the tackle, fill your gap and be where you need to be. So it is an underrated, important position. And I do think the Jets should try to improve it because Quincy Williams, like you said, talented, useful player, but is he stable enough to be a starter playing every single snap or close to it? I don't think he's quite there yet. So it is something I think they can improve. And there are some good options. So I would hope to see them get someone like I mentioned, a few, Jayon Brown, Azeez Al-Shaair, Quan Alexander, maybe even Leighton Vander Esch. These are guys who do have pass game potential. So I would look at one of these guys to maybe add some competition to linebacker. Other than that, looking at other positions, I'd be surprised if they looked at an edge rusher, maybe a lower tier guy, but Arden Key, someone like that.
Yeah. Do you think they'll bring somebody to try to take? Well, I was gonna say Vinny Curry's role, but I guess if you're drafting somebody, then Bryce Huff kind of slides into that role, and you have JFM maybe kicks more inside. I mean, I think there is room for another edge, but again, it's just such a great defensive line class. It's like you could take 3-4 defensive linemen, edged interior, and just maybe not 4, but take 3 defensive linemen between interiors and edge, and you could really build out this unit because that's how deep this class is. Are there any of those lower tier edge guys that you think could make sense from a scheme perspective?
I mean, like you said, the Vinny Curry role, I think there are maybe some candidates for that. Like Arden Key, I said. Dorrance Armstrong from the Cowboys, I think, is an underrated guy because he would really improve their edge setting and run defense, which I think is something they can improve at that position. So he's an underrated guy. Mario Addison from the Bills, if they're veteran pass rusher, defensive end, very much fits that Curry bill.
I hope we sign him just so I can hear how you say Mario, on a weekly basis. I really hope we bring him into the fold.
I don't know.
Because you said his name last week and I caught it. I didn't say anything, but I know don't change it. I'd love the Mario.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm all on board the Mario Addison train now.
It's just an Italian thing or whatever. That's just how I hear my family say it.
I guarantee there's a lot of people listening to this that are like, I say Mario. I'm Team Mario, but I think Mario is honestly a funnier way to say the name. So I'll say Mario. All right. In terms of predictions for tomorrow, I think there'll be some signings. So we'll probably have another podcast come out tomorrow night. So I guess what moves tomorrow specifically do you think the Jets get done? Not what do you want, but what do you think the Jets get done tomorrow? Today, by the time they're listening to it.
Man, I definitely feel good about Gilmore, or not necessarily good in terms of how I'd react to it. Just confident.
Yeah, you keep throwing that qualifier. Do you not want Gilmore? Can you just come out and say it already?
No, I like I said, I'd be okay if it's 1 year on a number that makes sense. I just always like to put in disclaimers to make sure I'm being clear about my stance because I don't want to be misinterpreted. That's all I'm doing. Okay. So I try to be descriptive with my explanations of.
Would you want him? Why would you put that qualifier unless you didn't want him though?
Well, because I said I would feel good as if, I'm explicitly stating I would love it no matter what. But if it were 2 or 3 years and it's a, bad number, then I wouldn't love the deal.
I can get behind 2 years.
I just want to rephrase. But anyway, I feel confident that either Gilmore or Williams will happen. Which one I'm trying to choose? I think there's more to the Williams thing. It really seems like there's a lot of talk that he's been their guy and there's mutual interest. I feel like that is going to end up happening. So I'm going to go with Marcus Williams. Other than that, I think we'll see them do I think they will get a linebacker. Yeah. They'll do a very low tier signing at defensive tackle. And then I think start working on maybe some of their own free agents, like specifically Flacco. Another tight end signing. I think we'll see another tight end as well. Maybe Hurst.
Howard. Oh, you do think they'll sign another tight end? You don't think they'll just go to the draft? Okay.
I think they are going to add another body.
I'll say this. Max Williams, now that they've already added Uzama, is very intriguing to me, depending on the number, but because of his blocking ability. And, if you sign another guy, it really does free you up in the draft to not have to take a tight end, because I like the tight end class, but I'm not going to act like I'm like in love with the tight ends this year, that this is like some amazing tight end class. Like it's a relatively, I don't want to say deep, but like there's a substantial amount of solid tight ends, but it's not like there's one guy that really is, a dominant force. Trey McBride's the closest thing, but even him, it's like, he's kind of undersized. I mean, you're hopefully you're getting like a Mark Andrews, but it's not like there's any Kyle Pitts this year. So yeah, if they really like a guy like Max Williams, I'd be all over that. I think you're right. I think the thing to keep in mind with Marcus Williams, this is why I think it'll get done, is there aren't many teams that have a needed safety that have the cap space that the Jets have. So there aren't many teams that can offer Marcus Williams or would want to offer Marcus Williams like $15 million a year. And I think that's part of the reason the deal hasn't gotten done is I think Williams probably maybe wants more than what the Jets are offering. Maybe the Jets are only offering 14 and he's trying to push him up to 15 or 16. But I think you're right. I think they do sign Marcus Williams. There's just a lot of smoke there. I think Stephon Gilmore probably ends up a Raider. Watch me be all wrong about this. I think they sign Al-Shaair, and I think they bring back Flacco tomorrow. Those are my three predictions are Al-Shaair, Flacco, and Marcus Williams for tomorrow. And then anything else behind, there'll probably be one other low tier signing at, somewhere else, tight end or defensive tackle or something. But by the time you're listening to this, maybe we will all look stupid because none of that will come true. But regardless, we will be back I guess it's at this point. Tomorrow night we'll record.
Yeah, I know. Today for me.
That's true. It's 10:20 my time. I'm on the West Coast. I know I missed my annual tradition of doing the "Here We Go" Joker gift because I slept in. I mean, it was like I woke up and it was like 9:20. I was like, oh shit, I missed my my Joker gift. But it's all right.
I didn't have a Joker tweet, but I had a well-crafted sarcastic tweet that I put out at 12:01 where I was calling for Joe Douglas to be. I didn't say for him to be fired, but it was a well done tweet.
Okay, I'll have to go check that one out. Yeah, so we will record another podcast Tuesday night to come out Wednesday morning. That's a little more clear. Assuming the Jets do literally anything, they sign somebody. If they only re-sign Joe Flacco, I don't know if we're doing a podcast. Maybe we'll wait another day. But assuming that, so there's some movement on the defensive back front, we'll be back tomorrow. So thank you to everybody for listening. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. You can follow Michael at Michael_Nania, myself at Ben W. Blessington. Go to jetsxfactor.com for the best place to go for Jets content. Michael, any last thoughts before we disappear for another day?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I've always waited for you to just say that and just put the pressure right back on me. Well, there you have it, folks. Michael Nania, everybody. Thank you for listening. Hopefully the Jets make some moves. Go Jets. You really threw me off. See, the outro now is all messed up because you didn't give me enough time to think about what to say. But, oh, God. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.